Hi everyone, Barbara Rankin here today with a cool project for you using ColourArte's Radiant Gels and Vivid Ultrametallics in silicone molds. Okay, a few days ago I made these flowers and leaves with Emperor's Gold Radiant Gels and I let them dry in the mold. When you remove them, you get such great detail. And let me show you, here's a closer look. Now this purple mold is a craft mold. But the pink one was sold as a food grade mold. However, once you use it for crafts, it should never ever be used again for food. So anyway, I just wanted to show you how I did this. I have a plain old plastic spatula that I used. And this here is the olive vine radiant gels. As you can see, I've used several different colors because you can use any color you want and just make bunches to use in later projects and have them ready. If you need a different color, you can always paint over it with another color to match your project. So you can see how thick and creamy this gel is and very easy to spread. Now, depending on the temperature, humidity, not to mention how deep your mold is, then this can take a few days to dry, which is why you will want to make them ahead. What I found was that the gel on top was drying, but the gel down in the mold was still wet. Luckily, I had not pulled it out of the mold completely. I had only carefully lifted a corner and I was able to push it back down into the mold and it was okay when I came back a day later. Now in this particular mold, it has spacers in it that make holes between the leaves. Let me show you on this one. You see this one has holes in between the leaf shapes, and it can be hard to get those holes cleared out when you're using clay. You can do it, you just have to work at it. But it is a bit easier with the Radiant Gel because you can just use your spatula to wipe the paint away from that area. And it doesn't matter so much what this side looks like. Remember, this is the back of the image, but I like to spread it as smooth as I can and clean up as much as I can around the edges. And then I'll just set it aside to dry. Okay, so that was the olive vine. Now I want to show you how well this gel works in these deeper, more intricate molds. So I'm going to use yellow rose radiant gels this time. Just clean off your spatula so you don't contaminate your colors, and then repeat the process. This time, however, you will want to push the gel down into the mold with the spatula to ensure you are getting that gel down as far as it will go. You don't want to have any air bubbles either. And when it dries, you will have something that looks like this. Okay, I've cleaned up my space, and as it happens to all of us, a few days went by because I had other projects to work on, which, as it turns out, is a good thing because that gave my radiant gels time to dry, and now I can show you how they look. First, I want to show you something. On this green leaf, you can see there is a very light film of paint around it, and if I don't clean this up, it will pull up with the leaf, and I will have to trim it all off with scissors. However, if I leave the leaf in the mold and use a damp baby wipe, I can remove that thin film of paint without disturbing the leaf and simply remove it clearly without any extra fuss. And as you can see, it is very flexible, and even the holes in between the leaves are coming out cleanly. Let me set it on this white background so you can see it better. And you'll want to clean your molds anyway, otherwise you'll get these little flecks of dried paint that you won't want to get showing up in your next piece. Now this was the yellow rose radiant gel, which removes cleanly from the mold, and that's it. So I'm going to finish cleaning off my molds, and when I come back we will play with the Vivid Ultrametallics. So I want to experiment a bit, and what I want to do is brush one of the molds with the primary elements before adding the Vivid, and the second one will be poured directly into the mold. I'm just curious to see if the powdered pigment will stick to the Vivid and create something cool or simply rub off. Since I've never done this before, you and I are going to find out at the same time whether or not it works. And I'm going to go ahead while I've got the primary elements out and add some of the pigment to one of the flowers in the mold so we can try the same experiment with that one. So I'm going to start with the leaves first. I'm just going to add the Vivid to the mold directly from the bottle. These tips make it really easy to do this. Now I'm using my spatula to press that paint down and work it into the mold to ensure the paint gets into all the nooks and crannies. I know one of our design team members, I think it was Cindy Porter, used really low profile molds that are used for cake makers and spread the Vivid into them, and that turned out really pretty. Go ahead and add more paint if you need to level it out and use the spatula to smooth it. Okay, so let's pour some straight into this leaf and push that paint down into the mold. And I've got my mold sitting on a pad of newsprint, and what that is going to enable me to do is pick this up and tap it underneath if I get any air bubbles. Now, I have no idea how long it will take the Vivid to dry. Again, it will depend on the weather, the climate, the temperature in your home, and so on. I know that Vivid dries fairly quickly on paper and canvas, but then that is a thinner application than what we have in a mold. And it is raining here today, so I may not be able to remove these from the mold by the end of this video. I may try to help it by setting it in a warm spot and hope it dries in time. However, I do not recommend putting it in a craft oven because the paint will bubble. If you try to speed up the drying time with a heat tool, I would say be extra careful again so that you don't overheat the paint and make it bubble. In the summertime, I can always find a warm spot, but now that winter is coming, it is much cooler outside. So it is best to just find a warm spot and let it dry on its own and make a bunch of them ahead of time. So I've just lifted my pad and tapping my finger under the pad in the mold to remove any air bubbles. I don't see any, so let me show you what it looks like. So I'm just going to set that aside to dry and come back to the flower mold. I need to clean off my spatula first, and then I'll be using the pink Azalea Vivid in these molds. Since the process is the same, I will fast forward this portion. Now here you can see I've got some bubbles in here, and so I'm going to lay it back on I'll remove the leaves, I'll lay it back on my paper pad and try and get rid of those bubbles. Yeah, that worked a little better. And if the bubbles are on the back side, it doesn't really matter. And if thumping it or dropping it onto the pad doesn't get all the bubbles, you can use a sharp tool like a piercing tool or even a pin to break them up. So that's it. Now all you have to do is set these aside to dry for a few hours, a few days, depending on temperatures, and be patient. Okay, so it's been, well, not quite 24 hours, and like I said, it was raining yesterday, and so I'm not exactly sure if these are quite dry. I'm pretty sure these may not be. This is such a thick mold. I do believe the leaves are, so let me see if I can pull this out and show you what it looks like. Oh yes, it's looking like it's going to come out. Okay. And I do have a little bit of cleanup to do here, but let me show you what I've got. And you see it picks up all that detail. Now let me see if this leaf is ready. Remember, this is the leaf we dusted with the golden nugget primary elements before we poured the Vivid in. Now, I didn't use my baby wipe to remove that excess paint film around the edges, but the film is so fine you can just pick it off with your fingernails. So let me show you a close-up. And yes, you can see the golden nugget on the surface, and it is not rubbing off. So I would say this technique is working. Looking at the flower here, I can see it's still not quite dry. So I'll wait a few days to make sure it's completely dry, and then I'll post a picture on my blog for you at Black Hole Art Studio. So I hope you liked playing with molds and paints today, and until next time, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's project video, please give me a thumbs up, and I hope you will consider subscribing to my channel so you won't miss any future tutorials. As always, thanks for watching, and always take time to play.